Never knew that. The sick man of Europe, really? That's over my head as well, but maybe, growing up in the UK, you're like, yeah, that time was not that great, but I've never heard anything like that. We don't know anything about that. More things that I just have to look up and learn. Hello and welcome back. Today I'm going to be diving into Economy of the United Kingdom, British Economy Unraveled. So I hope they kind of do a little history of where it all came from and just generally how is Britain doing? How are their finances, I guess? How's the economy? How's it looking for the future? How it was in the past? How they got to this point? I hope they kind of cover a couple of those topics and then always hearing on your end of things what it's actually like, if things are true or false. This might be a little dated, so that might be kind of interesting to hear your input on this. It's always been known as a very, very strong economy. One of the strongest economies in the world. It's always more pricey for us to go there because the pound is quite a bit more than the dollar, but completely worth it. So let's see how they got there, hopefully, how it's going, your thoughts on it. Is it true? Let's see this superpower in action.
The United Kingdom, known for double-decker buses, love for tea, red phone booths, Big Ben, the royal family, and as the second biggest economy in Europe. Made up of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, the United Kingdom is the fifth largest economy in the world by GDP, despite being the 78th biggest country. It is often described as one of the most globalized countries in the world. So globalized that even the origin of one of England's national food, chicken tikka masala, are up for debate. If the world has to thank this region for one thing, that would be what's termed as the Industrial Revolution. From 1759 to 1839, the Industrial Revolution shifted humans from hand production to machines.
Did the British invent the steam engine? Because that was massive. That changed the world, and to this day we use, trains.
Although many historians challenge this idea, nevertheless, that time not only brought major economic progress, but also many social and cultural changes along with it. The century 1815 to 1914 observed an increase of 15-fold textile production, 20-fold coal production, and 30-fold iron production.
That screams Industrial Revolution to me. I don't know what these other historians are doing, and maybe I'm just completely oblivious to it, but that just yells Industrial Revolution. Like, you are ramping it up like crazy. Things are moving along. The steam engine and other processes are becoming much easier, and you could mass produce things better. That's just me. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Not be wrong to say that this model was copied by other Western nations to advance their societies. Early 20th century, Germany and United States began to dare Britain's economic lead. After the end of World War I in 1918, the British Empire was among the victorious allies, but it had suffered huge economic losses and was no longer the illustrious industrial and military power. After the end of World War II in 1945, British Empire was again among the victorious allies, but their lead as an economic leader had diminished. The Empire of Japan captured its colonies in East Asia and Southeast Asia. The British Empire lost more of its power when the subcontinent achieved its independence and became Pakistan and India. Decolonization was inevitable. While Britain's side of the argument says the colonies, like the subcontinent, was costing them more than the economic benefits they extracted, the opposition of the story has debunked this many times, highlighting all the riches that were exploited. Later, the Suez Canal crisis marked the end of Great Britain's role as the world's prime powers. It was no longer controlling a quarter of the Earth's total area, and it was no longer the empire on which the sun never sets. Following the end of World War II, despite witnessing a somewhat prosperous growth in the 1950s and 1960s, the UK recorded weaker...
They still have an incredible amount of just islands everywhere. Everywhere there's islands. It's crazy, and just little pockets of land throughout the world. Yes, maybe it's greatly reduced, but I feel like it's definitely the only empire that it's still, the sun doesn't set. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but it's kind of close.
Growth compared to other European countries. This stagnation was often arguably blamed on the nationalization of major industries. While other countries like Japan and Germany were focusing on the free market economy with private businesses, the United Kingdom was nationalizing its industries. The inefficiency of these industries and the cost it took to keep them running had a severe impact on the economy. Lack of innovation, overseas competition, low-cost manufacturing by other countries, trade unionism, the welfare state, and the decline of the British Empire were all blamed as possible reasons for this outcome. By the 1970s, they were referred to as the sick man of Europe.
Never knew that. The sick man of Europe, really? That's over my head as well, but maybe, growing up in the UK, you're like, yeah, that time was not that great, but I've never heard anything like that. We don't know anything about that. More things that I just have to look up and learn.
In the 80s, they started to change things up by rolling back the nationalization process. Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, the first female Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, held the office for 11 years from 1979 to 1990. She stated clearly that she came with one deliberate intent: to change Britain from a dependent to a self-reliant society, from a give-it-to-me to a do-it-yourself nation. She set the country on a different path with neoliberal economic policies by privatizing state-owned businesses, mostly the service and industrial sector.
Is Margaret Thatcher generally, maybe not quite your specific opinion, but as a country as a whole, or just the UK as a whole, Margaret Thatcher, positive, negative? I know she's done a lot and probably a lot of great positive things, but a lot of controversial things, maybe. Just kind of the general consensus of Margaret Thatcher and what she did for the UK.
The tax cut, trade union reforms, and market deregulation were some of the other areas touched by the government. Maggie was probably one of the most polarizing figures in the country's history. For some, everything she did was right, and to others, she was totally wrong. We would love to hear your opinion about Mrs. Thatcher in the comment section below. The privatization, focus on a free market economy, and deregulation did save the country from going into further decline, but it was probably too late by then. By this time, the industries were so behind those of international markets that they were unable to match up in open competition. This limited the British economy to the service-oriented sectors. Thatcher's successors did follow the same economic policies as her, except for inclusion in the European Union, which was, in large part, a despairing move to enforce the country to become more competitive. Whether it was the European Union or the outcomes of the reforms by Margaret Thatcher, it seemed to have worked, and the UK saw sustained economic growth from 1993 onwards until 2008. The financial crisis in 2008 brought out all the problems that were less obvious, including productivity. It is also highly likely the productivity was already in decline, but it was overstated before the 2008 financial crisis, and it didn't look bad only because the financial sector of the UK was doing considerably great. This went on, and ultimately the EU became an easy scapegoat for the politicians and press. With Brexit, which stands for British exit, the country kept a stiff upper lip and decided to leave the European Union with a referendum in 2016. It stayed one of the most talked about topics in the country, other than always talking about the weather.
A topic that I don't go anywhere around. It's still crazy like today of how everything is slowly unfolding. I think slowly, but in big amounts. It's interesting.
While many argue with statements like, what do they even produce? Financial services are one of those sectors that don't show up on the books as prominently as McLaren's, but they do bring in a lot of cash. Financial services and insurance is the biggest contributor to the economy and accounts for around 3/4 of the total GDP. You can call it a knowledge-based economy. London remains the second biggest financial center in the world after New York City. Edinburgh also holds a high ranking for its financial.
And I think the financial sector, they're talking about the UK and New York City, or London and New York City. I think they flip-flop every once in a while. Like for a long time, it'll be London, then it'll flip-flop to New York. It's just going to go it's been going back and forth for, I think, quite a while.
Financial services industry. Another important service-related sector includes aerospace, which is the second largest aerospace industry in the world. Rolls-Royce is known to the general public for making cars, but they make most of their money manufacturing aviation-related stuff.
Yes.
The country receives the third highest inward foreign direct investment in the world. Foreign investment can boost any country's economy and can be a sizable source of capital. But if these investors send their profits out of the country, it's not so good. The UK seems to be an example of such a country. The United Kingdom has not recorded a positive current account balance since 1985. That means the country is making other countries grow richer at their expense. The UK is among the list of nations ranked the highest on the Ease of Doing Business Index. According to data collected in 2018, 1.1% of businesses operating in the UK were under foreign ownership, but they contributed to over 13% of total UK company assets.
Wow.
Almost a quarter of these foreign-owned corporations are owned from within the United States. Foreign investments not only give a boost to the economy, but it shows global trust in the country. However, the UK itself spends less on investments compared to any other G7 countries. Data on gross fixed capital formation as a percentage of GDP indicated the UK is behind other countries like Germany and France in investments. There is also a notable difference in economic prosperity among different regions of the UK, with London being the hub and its economy also being the largest per capita in Europe. While the United Kingdom is never generally termed as an oil country, the North Sea oil and gas production contributed significantly to the economy. It's the same oil that funds Norway's $1 trillion fund, but the UK and Norway took a completely different approach with oil. The National Health Service, NHS, not only provides free healthcare across the country, but it also provides jobs, tons of jobs. Back in 2015, it was ranked the fifth largest employer in the world, with 1.7 million employees. The pharmaceutical industry of the UK is the 10th largest in the world and contributes significantly to the country's economy.
It's great.
The
Really
UK
good.
is one of the top weapon exporting countries. The country has also been accused of selling weapons to war-torn regions which have witnessed human rights abuses. The United Kingdom is among the list of top countries with the most number of billionaires, and the wealth inequality rankings are pretty average. 65% of UK consumers are a country.
So those top 20, or I guess top 10 countries with the most billionaires. I would like this. I always generally like these, per capita calculation, not just, hey, this is how many we have, because the US has way more people living in it. In China would be pretty darn low. India would be very, very low. Germany and the UK would be pretty good, I think.
With the most number of billionaires, and the wealth inequality rankings are pretty average. 65% of UK consumers are reported to be loyal shoppers, which are higher than the global average of 61%. It's great for the local industry as keeping a connection with the consumers works great compared to short-term sales goals. Over 1/3 of the consumers, particularly the younger generation, value the brand's ethical behavior before buying. Value-added tax rate is 20% on most goods and services. The country's businesses must include VAT in the price. The British pound is the world's oldest currency still in use, but there is another factor that's possibly the country's biggest but most underrated international asset. That is the English language. The country's economy benefited from the international status of the English language. English has become a lingua franca in international business and relations. This does not include some of their accents and William Shakespeare's way of writing novels. British cuisine is not that advanced compared to Italian and French cuisines, but the British consume 167 million portions of fish and chips every year, making it a £1.2 billion food industry. The country has over 10,500 specialist fish and chip shops, which dramatically outnumbers other fast food outlets. The country has a big car industry, offering premium categories to cars for sporting events. The UK has some very reputable car brands like Aston Martin.
I thought Jaguar got bought out by an Indian company. Forget Tata Motors, something Motors. I guess they're still made in the UK. It's just kind of bought out by another company.
Bentley, Jaguar, Land Rover, Lotus, McLaren, Rolls-Royce, etc. Yes, some of them were sold to other brands from other countries.
Never
We
mind.
won't be getting into the details of how they match up against the German and Italian car brands, but you can let us know in the comment section. The country's economy faced its biggest annual decline in 300 years in 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic, as the GDP fell by 9.9%. Mostly all sectors felt the impact of lockdown and decline in demand followed by the recovery. On the other hand, the UK's economy received global attention ever since they decided to take a divorce from the European Union in 2016. The nation that says sorry a lot formally said goodbye to the EU on January 31st, 2021. Around 48% of UK exports go to the European Union, while around 52% of UK imports come from the European Union. It is still unclear how the departure from the EU would impact UK's economy as it happened amid the pandemic. The nation known for forming orderly queues was divided between the unnecessarily confident leavers and the strongly emotional remainers. Have they shot themselves in the foot, or is the European Union a slowly sinking ship? Only time will tell. Brexit will be what the United Kingdom makes of it. It's too late to discuss the objectivity of the decision. It's better to cut the fortune-telling and, as these guys said, take these broken wings and learn to fly.
Wow.
What do you think of the economic future of the United Kingdom?
I think they'll continue to do well because they're so heavily invested in the financial markets. I feel like as long as the UK remains strong in like the financial sectors, they'll be fine. They'll be great. They'll keep chugging away, just like they always have. Assuming they would probably have to keep their currency strong, and yeah, we'll see what happens. What do you think of this video? Yes, it might be a little dated. I guess not too much because they mentioned Corona. But what you thought of this video, how they kind of presented it. I'm glad they kind of went back and then they pushed forward through history and kind of how they got here. They kind of had a downturn, kind of came back, and discussed kind of what there is to possibly come in the future. So I'd like to know your opinion of like how do you feel about the economy of the United Kingdom? Seems strong to me. Where you think it's going to go? Positive, negative, unsure, because of these reasons, these stories, whatever it is, I'd like to hear. So until then, thanks for watching. We'll discuss in the comments, and have a good rest of your day.